Hello, I'm Noir Vortex. Like and subscribe if you like philosophy things and art and all that. Anyway, without further ado, I wanted to do a video today about this idea, or just this. I wanted to explore the concept of being an outsider in our current society and just explore that from many angles. And just stream of consciousness. You may notice I've got this new chin strap. It's a bit of a new style. Not so sure it works, but I mean, this will grow back and my moustache will get too furry. Anyway, what a way to start a philosophy video with pontifications upon my beard. I guess it's fairly typical. Anyway, so being an outsider in our current society, this is what I want to do a video about. So I had a lot of thoughts before. I'm just going to try and gather them up. Morning thoughts, you know, when you wake up and you just start thinking all this. Having all these thoughts come to me. So, I think the main thing I was thinking before was we live currently in a society of primarily extrovert and consumer culture values, right? That's I mean, with social media, for example, it's all about the social, human beings being social in a metaphysical environment, right? It's a meta space, actually. People go on about the meta, making the meta world, but the meta world has existed in at least a two-dimensional flat form, as opposed to the three-dimensional form, since we basically created networks for communication with each other and sort of social networks in one way or the other. I think I'm somewhat reminded of that scene. I'll try and post a clip of it here, from that Charlie Chaplin film, where there's this young anarchist kid. I can't remember what the film's called actually, but I just do love this clip, where he's saying, where is the individual? And I think that's the problem in our current society, in the way that society is modeled. Individuality is almost suppressed to conform to a group values, and almost in a way a sort of groupthink, but this is not in the sense of a communistic, hard left authoritarian groupthink. This is a consumer society led groupthink where almost like asking difficult questions or being a bit of a stickler in the, or having a contrary view in one way or the other, and not just for the sake of it. Obviously, being a contrarian for the sake of it is ridiculous, like one good example of that, right? So recently, well, literally just yesterday, the Queen, sorry, this is annoying as hell. There we go. Oh, fuck off. There we go. Fuck off, motherfucker. Anyway, cut that bit out. But anyway, yesterday the Queen died, for example. Now, I have a lot of friends who are left-wing and blah, 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 and it just seems that everybody's coming out now with, like, obviously that there's going to be a split there, because people, when it comes to royals, generally split down the middle on that. They're either very pro-royals, or they just don't care, a bit like me, or they're, like, very anti the royal family. And you do see this sort of, like, knee-jerk reactions, right? But again, none of this matters. This is all digital tip paper in a lot of ways. Social media is just a place which rewards, in a lot of ways, the people who are early adopters of the consensus view, right? I guess in some way or the other. So if and the algorithm basically does just award. So if if you're particularly inclined, you can jump onto a cause or a thing, and you can sort of just like gain traction from that, right? I mean, it's ever been thus, but again, it leaves out the place. The individual, in some respects, is lost in this current world, because if you have it's like there's not much depth complexity, right, to the way that these algorithms work. There's not much understanding of nuance. I've been banned multiple times from Facebook, for example, for posting something that in context makes complete sense, but without the proper contextual depth, it does appear like, controversial in one way or offensive, right? But offense isn't a bad isn't taking offense to something doesn't thereby imply that it's necessarily incorrect or not valid on some level. And also in general, okay, you can get offended by something. So it's an emotional reaction, right? It's not necessarily coming from anywhere that has any basis in logical reality. And logic is important. You know, it's not the only important value in life, of course. There is more to life than just pure logic, because life would be very boring and stale. We'd just be like machines if everything was just based on. But if we're talking about building a theory of knowledge, for example, or trying to prove that a proposition is correct, then yes, logic is obviously applicable in that sense. It's logical, right? But anyway, I'm getting off track a bit. I think for the outsider, what is the outsider in this world? I'm not just talking about myself, because that would be that would be a bit narrow, right? And I can't just talk about my own experience. I mean, obviously I'll come into it, but I think I'll talk about it first from my experience. So I'm quite introverted. I'm not really social unless I know people well, but then I'm fine. I can joke around and be funny and have a laugh and discuss interesting ideas, but I need to be around people who have a like mind. I've also often struggled with this because my interests are quite niche. You know, philosophy, art, modernism, postmodernism, film, but you know, not just that stuff, like metal as well. Like, I'm not like just some lofty philosopher up in his ivory tower, because that would make me an extremely dry person. You know, I think you have to have both these elements. I think the best thing in life to aim to be is an intellectual and a monkey, right? I think an intellectual monkey is the best thing to be in life. But that's just for me. And not everybody's going to be like that. Some people have just a different way of being in the world. But where am I going with this? But yeah, so I think Susan Cain wrote this book, The Quiet Power of Introverts, and I really enjoyed reading that book because it spelled out a lot of what I've been thinking for a long time. We do live in a society that is focused on extrovert values. It's this focused on appearance. It's focused on the surface level of things, right? And introverts, in a lot of ways, do not value these values. They're sort of irrelevant, right? Like, we value, if you're an introvert, you value meaning, you value depth, you value the deepness of life, the deep connections that bind us together as human beings, whether they be emotional, intellectual, all these things. These values are often, not all the time, I'm not saying all extroverts are, you know, just like superficial, that would be reductive, but like there's a significant group of people with extrovert values who will see these areas of life as pretentious, or often it comes from an insecurity, right? It comes from an insecurity that they don't understand these things, so therefore they're going to discount them. But these people who think these things are often very successful people in terms of the business world. I mean, if I'm around sometimes, like I'm in London at the minute, right? And I will see these people wandering around who are obviously very rich and successful. They either work in finance or they work in banking. And you can just tell they've never really, they just have a certain behaviour. And I'm being judgmental now. Maybe I am being, in my own way, like judgmental. But these are people whose values are purely focused on the material. Right, that's what I'm going for here. They're focused on materialism. They're focused on the here and now. They're focused on, I want to save up for a new car. I want to get a new flat. Sort of. I mean, if you want to talk in like internet meme speak, like normies, like big time normies, right? They're interested in the acquisition of material wealth to therefore gain power in a time and a space for like 20 years or whatever, until they can retire and you know, have 2 kids or whatever and a wife. Have a miserable wife. I don't know, that's a bit over the top, but you know what I mean. Like they're focused on the material things in life, whereas I think this outsider or these the introverts who are less the population, I think overall, we are not so focused on the here and now. We're in a sense, I think a lot of introverts are focused on eternity. This is why I like Nietzsche, because his whole metaphysical framework of his eternal return idea is the idea of eternity. So what can you give to eternity? What can you do to bring the Übermensch around like that? Okay, like we can get into the specifics of all that, but what can you do to bring the Übermensch into existence? The man of culture, or women of culture, or the person of culture, the person of achievement, the person of who's going to really change the world, right? And it might not be you. It might be that you contribute a tiny little piece of the puzzle to bring about the Overman, the Übermensch, right? That is an interesting idea from Nietzsche. Whether you think it's delusional in some sense or a bit elitist, it is a interesting, at least, idea. And the eternal return is the idea that you will live the same life again and again and again, which can, if you have deep regrets, can be a deeply traumatic realization. I don't think it's obviously literally true. I mean, we don't know if reincarnation exists. We don't know if our energy just goes round and round and round and round in a sort of universe merry-go-round. We just don't know that. There's no way to prove it, really. Consciousness is a huge mystery. No one really understands what consciousness is. We don't know where it comes from. I mean, obviously the brain, it seems, generates consciousness, but we don't know. I digress. I've gone off on one there. I've gone off a different tip. But basically, essentially, is it? I think if you are an outsider, like, and I know I feel this at the minute. Like, I feel like I value art, I value culture, I value books, I value reading, I value knowledge, I value all these things. But I'm not, and I'm engaged intellectually with all these things. I've written 5 books. I've made all my paintings. Varying degrees of quality, but I'm getting better all the time. I've made my digital apps, I've made my games. I often release a lot of this stuff and for free. I'm trying to learn to play the game a little bit more with all that thing. But I do have an ethical core of, like, in a sense, like, I want to, if I can share something that's not going to cost me anything, then I'll happily do it. I do have a strict, a moral core of sharing is a big thing in my mind. But we live obviously in a consumer culture, capitalism, sort of like late stage capitalism, where people just hoard. They're like dragons. They become like dragons, and they want to just hoard all their stuff. And, like, I do see a point in George Carlin's point of this is just stuff. When you die, this stuff is probably going to go to a tip. A lot of it, anyway, unless some of it has some sort of value to the society or the culture, right? So stop hyper-focusing on stuff. It's not that important. And this is what drives me crazy when I mean, okay, like, it's nice, it's a good thing to look good, feel comfortable in your own skin, present yourself as you want. But there is also a certain pressure from society to conform, which is a pain in the ass. Like, to be honest, there's a like, okay, take for example, if I was to go to say I tell my parents, or I don't know, authority figures in my life, whatever, that I have an interview for a job, I don't know, next week. The first thing they're going to say is, cut your beard off, cut your hair, make it short, conform, wear a tie, wear a shirt. None of this stuff has any relevance to how I will perform in a job. Thankfully, in the world I work in, programming, people give less of a shit about all this stuff, which is essentially superficial, right? It's not. There is nothing there's no intrinsic value to me wearing a tie, which is basically just a signifier pointing to my. So it's a symbol of authority, right? It just points to my cock. That is what it is. It is a. It's just a. It's what it is. It's just a tie. Like, it doesn't have any. There's nothing intrinsically. There's nothing in that is intrinsically smart, right? There is nothing in it. It's just a conforming signifier or whatever. Like, it's something that the culture says you have to conform to appear smart, whatever that means. Hey, look at me now. Look, I'm wearing a smartest shirt, programmer t-shirt. I've got a chin strap beard, which could be better, obviously. I've got my hair is just like how I like it, and to be honest, like, my standoffish attitude of all of this is, well, if you don't like how I look, then fuck you. Like, I don't give a shit. It's no skin off my bones. I'm not going to conform just for the sake of conformity, basically. If you have a problem with how I look, or you have a problem with how I present myself, it's your problem. It's not my problem. Why is that my problem? So you want me to conform to some, some present? It's like almost like a presentation layer, right? There is no difference. It's just these wearing certain clothes is just a symbol of power, and it doesn't actually represent anything really at all. It doesn't even represent power. It's a veneer, Anyway, that's that. I'll probably leave it at that. It's like 50 minutes long. Probably just talked enough there. There's probably enough interesting ideas to chew on, I guess, for anybody watching. But yeah, essentially, a lot of nonsense is basically generated by culture. A lot of nonsense is generated that is actually quite nonsensical. When you actually examine it, I mean, let's not even get onto religion and all these other orthodox structures of power. They are pure constructs, but people talk about them, especially people who've never really investigated like the deeper aspects of these constructs. They talk about them as if they were. It's like Terence McKenna said. They are virtual realities. They're reality tunnels, like Anton Wilson described. They're reality tunnels. They're not. There's no valid. There's no actual truth, objective truth to any of these things. But people talk about them, these constructs and these concepts, as if they were the concrete as the sun or the earth. Like they're not. They are constructs. They are constructs of culture and society. That is literally what they are. And the sooner that people, and if you are in any level an outsider, the sooner you come to terms with the fact and you're able to sort of realise that, the more you can just get on with being yourself and self-actualising and all that sort of thing. Anyway, that's the 18-minute video, so there you go. That's some food for thought on culture, conforming, and etc. etc. I'll leave the video there. Have a good one. Bye.